Welcome to episode 4. During this episode, we will hear of the challenges of selected women who serve as a senior pastor in a Black Baptist church.
Power is not power. Power concedes nothing without a struggle. I believe that Frederick Douglass said that, and it's true in the church that oftentimes when you find what you find with most pastors in their initial days or years of pastoring, most of the battles are over issues of authority and power. Who has the authority to make decisions? And it was no different from me either. So I would say that was probably one. And of course, sexism is deeply embedded in our churches anyway. And so even though people think that they are past it because they elect a woman, there are still vestiges of sexism, underlying vestiges of sexism that you just have to kind of work through, and you have to give people a chance to grow and not necessarily think that everything is personally directed at you, but realize that it's a learning curve and a growing curve for people because they're not used to having a woman in leadership. Right. And even though they may have voted, their lives have been informed by not only a church, and I'm not saying my church, I'm saying church quotations, that is sexist and that is patriarchal. Right. But also a culture and a society that says the same thing. So even though they were okay with their decision, they still had to deal with people who work with them who said, "Oh, y'all just elected a woman, y'all going to hell," or you all elected a woman. Well, you know what the Bible says? The Bible said a woman ought not have authority. So on the one hand, you are well adjusted and you are secure, and you feel at peace with your decision when you're at the church, but then you go out and you have these other people with all this other stuff. So I would say there were internal challenges, but there were also external challenges as well. And the external had to do with us overcoming these problematic scriptures that were often thrown at us. And just the overcoming the deeply embedded sexism that people feel toward women.
And what about
the biblical literalism, the tradition? Yeah,
right.
Because all of that is a result of what people have been taught, what they have learned from authority figures in their lives, and of course, to break with that is to say that Mama and them was wrong, and sometimes Mama and them were wrong. The truth is, sometimes Mama and them were wrong, but it's hard to admit that, even when you come into a knowledge, when you are enlightened and you learn something different, or through theological reflection, you arrive at a different conclusion. It's still very difficult to say, that what your mother told you, or even your former pastor, told you was not right.
Right. And so I'm just curious now. You've said so much. But those problematic scriptures, so generally speaking, since I have been in ministry, I have found that it's to my benefit if I just allow my gift, my calling, my anointing to show, the call of life, versus me trying to engage in a lot of, debating and dialogue with folks who try to hold on to some of these problematic scriptures. How have you that? How have you handled that?
One of the things that I do, even to this day, when new members join our church, I recommend that they get a copy of a book called What Paul Really Said About Women. Because what I say to members is, let's go ahead and deal with the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is, I still represent a very small percentage of pastors in this city and across this nation. The average church is not led by a woman. So let's go on and get that out there. And while it's not like it used to be, it's still important to help people feel a sense of peace about their decision. Because as I said before, even in 2023, I have members that still encounter folk that say things to them like, you know what the Bible says about women. So I give them that so they can have ammunition, if you will, not to win an argument, because I tell them the goal is not to win an argument. The goal is that you be so certain of your decision that the argument won't cause you to leave this church. And of course, I don't spend a lot of time either debating about whether or not I'm called or not. I tell people all the time, it's too late for the discussion, because you might not agree with it. But when you finish, my name is still on this sign and it's been out there for 28 years. So you have a right to disagree, but that doesn't necessarily mean that because I've said yes to God that I'm going to hell. So
biggest challenge, it is a personal challenge for me. When you come in and you have all this energy, you want to do everything. And now I still live in Atlanta. I still, Monday through Friday, I'm the assistant dean of students at Candler School of Theology at Emory University. So, I work 7 days a week, happily married, and we have an 11-year-old son. And so the balance with that.
Finding a rhythm that makes sense for each week and for the stretches, rhythm for my personal life, rhythm for ministry, because in addition to being Shiloh's pastor, I also am an itinerant preacher. I'm the assistant secretary of Hampton Ministers Conference. I serve in other capacities that are not specific to Shiloh. And so finding a rhythm, right, with those things.
Yeah, so, the Bible speaks about it, like Jesus kind of said, like, sometimes the prophet isn't welcome in their own home. And I'm not going to say that I'm not welcome, but it has been a very unique situation, because the thing about it is that my congregation are actually people that help raise me. So just that transition of individuals really being able to see just how God is a God that really makes things work together, right? And the connecting dots. But also the transition of how do we go from this baby Sierra that we help nurture and raise to now being able to trust and really rely on this leader Sierra to, shepherd and pastor. So I would say that was probably like the greatest opportunity even now of that transition. And also being able to show up in a manner where I'm always advocating and acknowledging my pastor works, but also acknowledging the works that God wants to do within me, and being very careful that individuals don't place me in a position where they're trying to mold me as a duplicate of my pastor, but really respecting the gift and the calling that God has given me. So, the beautiful reality of these two intergenerational women merging together to continue this legacy for another 28 to 30 years, but also me showing up in my authentic self.
2021, I was diagnosed with severe COVID and I was hospitalized for 8 days, and I lost a lot of weight and I was sick, but I kept showing up. And then about 5 months later, I was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. And I think that, to believe it or not, played a good role in their respect level for me. And the Lord began to speak to me in 2022 that I needed to let them love on me, because I had become I love them, but I had become so guarded from being hurt by them so many times over and over and over again. I really believe that it's because of the illness and my faithfulness to serve in spite of the illness that has turned the heart of them toward me. And I've allowed them to love on me more than, because I never got anything for anniversary. They just didn't, they weren't nice people. They just weren't nice. And to see them now and to see God really turn their hearts, I'm just glad that the church is united. And to hear, because I don't want to take up too much time, but to hear my oldest deacon, who is 94 years old, who was anti-women, who stood up in the church on the day of my election, and they had planted a seed for someone to say that I had abused them so that they could block the election. To hear him now say at 94 years old, she was good for our church. She's good for our church. And she's good for our community. It's made it heartwarming that, they get it. And to see the deacons, stand with me and beside me and protect me. And my chairman deacon has always been there. That's why they sued him. But the other deacons had not. And so a lot of them have died out since then, but things are different now.
So are you still going through treatments, or
I'm in hospice. No, I'm terminally I'm terminally ill. I'm on hospice. I still preach every Sunday. As a matter of fact, this is the first May will be the first time that I move into preaching twice a month versus every Sunday. I've decided to kind of take care of my health as much as I can. I don't look like hospice. And some days I don't feel like I have terminal cancer either. But the meds remind me, because I take medicine literally around the clock to keep the pain managed. There was nothing else that they could really do for me treatment-wise. So I made the decision that I wanted to, if I didn't have anything that was going to make it better, I didn't want to be sick. I would rather, because it makes you really sick.
My greatest challenge, I would say, is not having the mentorship. I love my pastor, Dr. Marcus D. Cosby, but he's never started a church. He walked into a mega church, And so I believe he did the best he could with me. And then there's always that you can't get too close to women in ministry because of the optics. And he has shared that with us in clergy meetings. So the biggest challenge is having to figure things out on my own. And trusting God, and not that God isn't able to do that, but I guess because you see men have fathers in the ministry that take them alongside and for me, I've had to search out my own mentors, or it was Dr. Leslie Francisco. She's a young preacher, but she said something that really spoke to me. She said, sometimes we have to become what we need. And when I heard that, I started mentoring other preachers, and it's amazing how God just started feeding me information, feeding me, understanding that I did not have before, because I needed to pass it on to others. So I have about 4 women that I mentor. They are not pastors, but they're preachers. And then I have a ministry called Platforma, where I have about 100 preachers in that ministry, and we train in sermon preparation and things of that nature.
I think the joy has been getting them to be more authentic in their faith, more inquisitive in their understanding of the Word of God, and more connected to community. They consider them, to devalue the building per se.
My greatest challenge is, you take a deep breath, you ready for this? My greatest challenge and opposition has been women. But I realized something. When I first encountered the kind of opposition that I was having with women, I learned something, and I'm still processing it through, and that is, it's not that you don't have opposition from men, but they're more subtle with it. So don't get me wrong. Don't assume that every man is in the corner for ministry. They're just more subtle with it. So they will let one woman on the board.
Right.
Subtle with it. One woman on the flyer. It's a 10 days revival and only one woman. It's subtle. That was my biggest really challenge, navigating that. And I tell you, one of the ways that helped me tremendously with it is this man. He's in heaven now, Mr. Thompson. And I had a meeting with Mr. Thompson. He became a deacon in my church. And I was talking to him about it. And I said, Mr. Thompson, they undermining me, ta. And he said to me, Doc, he said, Pastor, I want to tell you something. Good and godly people will follow good leadership. Woman leadership, not a man leadership, good leadership. He said, headship without leadership is a sinking ship. And he said to me, if you lead, not as a woman pastor, not with this chip on your shoulder, if you just provide leadership, they're going to get in line. The moment he said that to me, it liberated me, because women tend to pass. I'm not a woman pastor. I'm never myself. I'm a pastor that's a lady. There's no such thing as women pastor, just like there's no such thing as male pastors. It's just pastor. Ephesians said, and he calls some to be pastors. Doesn't say women pastors, men pastors. So once you realize I'm just called to be a pastor, and I'm going to provide leadership, they're going to fall in line. Because sheep follow good shepherd.
My greatest challenge and my greatest victory are one and the same. I'd say survival. My greatest challenge is surviving the day-to-day, the biases, the day-to-day biases that even individuals who say that they are in favor of women pastors, even people who voted for me as a woman pastor, they don't realize that they still have unconscious biases that prevent them from fully accepting and treating a woman as fully equal in a totally egalitarian manner. So again, I mean, we all operate with biases. That's human nature. If you have a brain, then you're biased. But the society has really ingrained a lot of things in people, individuals, like I said, including women, to make the day-to-day work of ministry a challenge. So I'd say my greatest challenge has been the unconscious biases of individuals who very well may be well-meaning, but who still hinder the work of ministry. And my greatest victory has been overcoming those challenges and still doing what God has called me to do, which, pastoring, a church in Harlem. And that has been making real inroads. I mean, this past, I was recently named one of the top 100 faith-based leaders in the state of New York, not the city, the entire state. And that does not include Baptists only. It includes people across all denominations and religions. It includes rabbis, it includes presidents of seminaries and such. Be named one of the top 100 influential leaders in the entire state. I testimony to what God has called me to do with the ministry that He's given me in Harlem. During the pandemic, we were one of the few churches and the only church in Upper Harlem that was doing testing when testing was not being done. Testing became widely available, but not immediately. And so we partnered with Northwell Health, and we began testing individuals. We were able to set up vaccination clinics, and we had an HIV/AIDS ministry where we were able to get funding to help people. We were giving flu shots before the pandemic,
Wow.
people in the community. So, to be able to do these things and still, I'd say, raise my son.
Mm-hmm.
I just got married last year for the first time. 56, I was. Yeah. And so it's my first marriage. And so to raise my son and to still pastor those two churches, been called to them, and to affect change in the community in the way that God has enabled us to do so. I think that has been a great challenge, to continue education and become a Jeremiah Wright Scholar at McCormick Theological Seminary with my DMin, and to continue teaching as well at this country's largest urban university system. And those have been my greatest victories. And then, like I said, to become married to the person that I was dating in the 90s, and to be during COVID, those are my greatest victories. So survival and the ability to thrive.
My greatest challenge and my greatest victory are actually one and the same.
Okay.
Beginning your ministry in a pandemic. Literally having to navigate a church that just came off of 1 year of losing their senior pastor, and into the next year shutting down, and having this new widow, mother of 3, who, a few months out from preaching her initial sermon, but is, going on the path, to fully be ordained and installed. And we've got to trust her, right? So we've got to follow her through that. So that was a huge, huge challenge, to bring a church along that was very, kind of traditional and functioning. Prior to the pandemic, when we would introduce the idea of a conference call, that was like, no, we didn't stream yet. Prior to the pandemic, we weren't online. We had a Facebook page, but, there was, we had a website, but the inside of our church was the same as it was when my father-in-law purchased it in 1978. There was a lot that I had to get down quickly. And so, but then that turned to be my greatest victory, was being able to lead my church successfully, to find the strength, the voice, God-given confidence, as he told Joshua, be courageous. So, just kind of courageous and bold to tell my church, I know we're in this pandemic, but everything that we put on the calendar is going to happen. Every outreach, every, event, fellowship, it'll just happen differently, but we're not going to cancel. We're just going to pivot. And to have them trust and then see it. I actually renovated the church in that time, brought us online, new technology, new protocols, new ministries. And so for that, we've actually come out of this pandemic much stronger than we were going into it.
Well, my greatest challenge is just change from the status quo. The church folks, period, don't like change. So This is a very old historic church, and we had to change the way we do things to move into the 21st century and to do real and relevant ministry for today. And they were very much stuck in this kind of time capsule.
Right.
The pandemic forced them to do some stuff online and to change. And I really just pushed that envelope and pushed them into different ways of envisioning ministry. But a part of that, even envisioning change, has been their reception of me as a female pastor. And fortunately, this group is very proud to have this woman pastor. And some of them will even admit I was very skeptical until I started to hear her and started to see what she was doing and see what she was about. So it is just this whole process of changing culture of, a church that has historically been one way to move into a new paradigm.
The greatest challenge indeed has been just, it's a lot like teaching, when you go in teaching and you expect the children, the people to be at one place. And when you put something in place and then you realize, oh, we're not there yet, having to back up. So those have been the greatest challenges, that and just, the gifts that are needed to be effective in some areas just aren't in the church. So that has been the greatest challenge. So we've missed out on, some opportunities and those things that we could have done, but I just didn't have the intellectual capital to do it. And so, just kind of talking to myself and saying, all right, let's see what we can do with what we got.
Well, even though it's a church that I founded, I think that everybody comes with their own perspective and understanding of church. I think that the way in which I was under 4 pastors who were male before I became a pastor. And so, like most associates, more is caught than taught. And so I can count on one hand with fingers left of everything that my male pastors told me. But I was greatly influenced by what I saw them do and how I saw them operate. And so the challenge is, as I have operated my leadership style, the way I present myself, the way I lead and my expectations as a leader, that not that it's challenged, but I think that it's always received differently because I am a female. And immediately the men that joined, it was like a group of about 20 people. And the men came in and they were calling me baby, sweetie. And I had to say, pastor will do.
Right.
No. No, pastor. You can just call me pastor. I appreciate that, but you don't have to call me those terms of endearment.